Ever notice how nobody ever wants to talk about money? This show is trying to change that by having real, honest conversations. Think about it as like a conversation between friends, just if your friends were really good at giving financial advice. This is Real Talk with Atlantic Credit Unions. I'm your host, Mel Henniger, and today's topic is the relationship between money and freedom. Money and freedom are two things that are kind of inherently tied together. To have money is to have the freedom to do what you want. To not have the money is to be restricted. My guest Carmel, like most of us, has a complicated relationship with money and freedom. A few years ago, she was filling her car up with gas, and when she went to pay, her card was declined. Her funds had been drained. She was in an abusive relationship, and her partner was using money as a means of control. He was restricting her freedom. Even though Carmel is no longer in that situation, her relationship with money and how it can be tied to freedom in various forms remains. Carmel is also a musician, among other things. As a musician, a steady paycheck isn't always the reality. So joining myself and Carmel today to talk about things from a financial perspective is Nadia Gardin-Langell. And Nadia has worked with East Coast Credit Union for over 22 years and currently holds the position of Financial Services Officer. So welcome, Carmel and Nadia.
Thank you.
So Carmel, what went through your mind that day at the gas station?
To be honest, my first thought was, I'm such an idiot, which I think speaks a lot to sort of the complications of this issue, that I had no control over that issue per se, but I still took it as a sort of lack of either knowledge or skill on my part that I ended up there. So that's sort of an interesting thing to think about. And the second one was just sort of blind panic, like what now? It's really debilitating to suddenly not be able to move through the world. And you immediately realize how much we rely on even just a few dollars to get through our day. So yeah, a few thoughts that day.
Yeah, and so like what did you do? You know, did you have a credit card that you could kind of pull out to pay for that, to at least kind of to get back to where you needed to go, or you know, were you kind of stranded?
Yeah, I did have a very small window of backup in that moment, enough to get me through the day and to make some phone calls to my other support network that could sort of get me out of the situation quickly. But it's interesting that in all of the many sort of traumatic experiences that I had during that time, that particular moment is one that has always stuck with me. And it seems like a simple thing, just that feeling of that kind of like flashing decline thing coming up and being so shocking and surprising. So that has sort of stuck with me as a sort of like never again moment that I have tried to avoid having happen again.
Yeah.
But for sure I was lucky in that I had a support network in that very moment. But it did change everything. And I think because it's an inarguable sort of, it's completely unemotional actually. Yeah. It's very black and white. Like there is no money there, and there was 10 minutes ago as far as I knew. So it's sort of, it's outside interpretation, it's outside of emotion, it's a very on the ground practical problem that you have to deal with.
Yeah. So Nadia, when you kind of counsel members for how to set up their finances, especially you know, maybe in a relationship, what are some of the things that you would tell people to keep in mind?
I would tell people, you know, it's very important to get into good habits, whether it's an abusive relationship or just good money management skills in terms of setting goals, making savings plans, just as important as paying your bills on time, setting aside money so that, you know, you're working towards something, that you are not put in a vulnerable position where, okay, I have no money right now, what am I gonna do? You know, you need to sort of plan ahead, and to realize that it's never too early or too late to take control of the situation, whether it's, it could just be starting very baby steps, you know, setting a little bit aside, trying to get control over your own situation, getting a good savings plan, planning ahead, budgeting, so many of these things that, you know, really are so important to experiencing that financial freedom and understanding how that savings and how having control in your own finances can really set you, down the right path for your future goals, for your future freedom, financial freedom, and to not have to feel like you're in a vulnerable or a controlling position where money is, you're put in that kind of position that you have a backup plan.
Yeah, so you mentioned, savings plans. So Carmel, you're a musician, which means a steady paycheck every 2 weeks isn't always the reality. Which also means it can be really tough to budget and to save. So what are some of the tips, Nadia, that you would give, to kind of, how do you plan for that when you have an uncertain income and you can't make that set contribution?
Right, yeah, that definitely presents a little more challenge to the equation. But again, budgeting, taking a look, knowing that, okay, I have this pot of money right now because I just got paid. Not sure where my next paycheck is coming from. So setting aside, money for the future, saying, okay, this is what I have. I need to live right now, but I need to understand that I also need to set something aside for down the road, to sort of tie me through. And that might be a continuous project, to continuously try and save, even if it's just a little bit, but to have that little nest egg that can hopefully continue to grow to, offset those times where maybe you're in a lull for work, and budgeting and understanding the difference between wants and needs. And hopefully, even before you get to that point, understanding the relationship between debt and having to make those debt payments and, as opposed to saving for things, not borrowing all the time, not relying on credit card, although you made a very good point, like you do need to have a backup plan, whether that is a savings or whether that's knowing that I have available room on my credit card and I know that if I use it, I can pay it off, I'm not going to get myself in trouble. So just budgeting, planning, always planning to set aside a little bit for the future, as you don't know what's coming your way. It's the unexpected that you sort of need to plan for.
Yeah. And so, Carmel, how have you, what's your strategy? How have you kind of worked to manage that and set that money aside?
Yeah, well, I think one of my responses to that earlier situation we were talking about was to become a workaholic and to make sure that I was having every form of income I could possibly ever get. And also the thing you mentioned about saving, even if it's in small increments, that has been something that I implemented, that literally, even if it's $10, something is going into my savings account. Yeah. And another weird sort of obsessive trick I have is that I like to keep my savings account always at a round number. So even if I'm putting $4.69 in there for my checking, if I do it kind of repeatedly, it weirdly adds up a tiny bit. And I mean, these are tiny things, but I think that especially if you're in a situation where you have very little control over most things in your life, for whatever various reason that could be, it gives you a sense of some control if you're able to even incrementally do something like that. And I think that some of what we're talking about is sort of high level when you're dealing with something that is really insidious in the way that controlling situations happen. They affect your confidence, they affect your rationality, they affect your physical, emotional, mental, all of your abilities. They kind of trap you. And sometimes you can't have this rational conversation in the moment.
Yes.
So that's why I think having people like you to go to in that moment when you can't pull those rational ideas out of your own body when you're in the crisis is really useful, because it gives you a bit more confidence to be listen, even if I can only do a little bit, it's enough for now because it's what you're doing. And then you kind of scale that habit up.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, as your life stabilizes, as you might get better opportunities, you already have that habit and you just kind of put an exponential thing on it. That's my math knowledge. So
Exactly. Sometimes when you start those habits around savings and planning for the future, you start small, but then as you get used to seeing, what that savings plan does for you in the sense of providing a little bit of freedom, or providing the confidence that, hey, I'm good. If something happens, I know I have that. It almost creates its own momentum, and you start to want to do more because you realize you kind of see it for yourself, how that being in a better financial position can help you with your freedom from financial stress. That's a huge aspect in so many people's lives, right? It's that control. So having that freedom and realizing, okay, I don't have to be I don't have to be controlled by this right now, because I'm working towards it. And you gain more momentum, and you want to put more away. Of course, situations may determine how much you can put away. If employment is more sporadic, but you start that habit, and it kind of moves along, and it gets you on the right path. Yeah.
Yeah, so what does financial freedom look like to you now, Carmel? That, you're sort of in a better situation overall, and, or have those habits formed to plan for those events.
Yeah, I think financial freedom is connected with understanding what resources you have available. So whereas before, because of confidence or fear issues or just actual literal barriers, I wouldn't have been as open to go to my institution and say, I have this issue, what are your ideas of how I could fix it? Whereas now I would do that. I would say, here's the situation, and like, what kind of products could help me in this situation? So some of it is just confidence and a bit of willingness to be a bit vulnerable, to find, to ask for help. And I think the same goes for, I'm really lucky and quite privileged in the version of experience that I had, and that I did have a support network who could step in and help me at a moment of crisis, just enough to sort of make it possible for me to be removed from it. Right. But the thing is that these issues carry with you throughout your whole life. So you always have this in the back of your mind, that this is a thing I need to pay attention to. And in some ways, it's a positive lesson. So I'm much more diligent about my finances, and I'm much more aware of the ways that people can use money to control and manipulate you. And so I sort of have more of a defense about it now, and am less naive about, just being aware that I need to really be in control of that for myself and be confident about that need.
Yeah. So Nadia, for other members who might find themselves in a similar situation and maybe aren't as able to access that support network, what are some of the steps that they can take to kind of start to get out of that situation?
Yes. Yeah. Really important first step is to go talk to somebody. Come in, talk to a financial expert, let them, be honest, let them see what options are out there. Starting off, it may be setting up, if you have joint finances, maybe it's setting up something in your own name that you can control. It is you. And again, starting small, just having a way to be open, though, is key, and to not be afraid to go talk to somebody. That's why we're there.
Yeah.
It's to help people in their financial position, whatever that position looks like right now, and to have to deal with, to have that relationship between myself and my member that consists of open communication and honesty, and perhaps having the ability to set forth a plan, and knowing that with confidence we can see this through, and working together, but take control and start small, open your own account that you can control, that you have some way. And we do see these situations happen, and we have had to look at ways to help those who are in that sort of abusive relationship. And every situation is a little different. It's a very delicate situation, right? So you sort of have to look at each person individually, and sometimes it may feel like there's no hope, but just through conversation and getting the information out and kind of looking at it together, you may find a way to work towards a better future, better financial future. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
Thanks so much. This has been Real Talk with Atlantic Credit Unions.